Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of I'm Here Too, Settling into the Hug of Friendship, a conversation with Amy. For as long as I can remember, I've been obsessed with friendship. More specifically, deep female friendship. What does it look like? How do you find it? And once you do, how do you make sure you never lose it? As I get older, I'm realizing that sustaining close and meaningful friendship over the span of decades doesn't just happen. It takes work. But when you get it right, it's priceless. I've wanted to explore the topic of friendship on this podcast for a while, but I knew it would take someone brave, honest, and compassionate to help me grapple in a way that might be of service to others as well. Enter Amy. We've known each other for over 30 years. She's seen me at my lowest, my most confused. We've argued, we've hugged tightly, we've known distance, we've known closeness. She was one of the first people to embrace the parts of me that I tried to hide from myself, and through it all, she's still here. If you've got a friend like Amy, then you know how special this conversation is going to be. And if you don't, then stick around and find out. Our friendship hasn't been perfect, but it's been beautiful. Off we go. Enjoy.
Well, let me be honest. So this topic for me is quite fraught.
Okay.
Because I'm not really I don't really have friends other than you and very few people that really shows my weakness in certain ways. It shows dare I say my abnormality. Um and so I'm a little embarrassed about that. Um, and, for all of my psychological delvings into the various wounds I have and the defenses I have around them, I haven't totally excavated this one. I understand my friendship with you, and I have lots of memories and musings, but the topic of female friendship is one that I've maybe tiptoed around more. Um, and I guess you're catching me at an interesting time because Abby is so clearly like immersed in her friendships and at ease in her friendships. And I did make a promise when she was born that I was going to not let my social anxieties hold her back, and I didn't. But I still hold me back. I don't hold her back, I hold me back. So that's just a little bit of a preamble on this topic.
I mean, okay, first of all, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you in all seriousness is I don't think you're alone in this at all. Like I think this is actually a lot more prevalent than it may appear in terms of at least women I know, right, in my life. And I think of myself too. I may seem to have like a lot of different connection points, right,
Yes,
throughout
you
my life.
do.
And I have lots of people who I believe would show up for me if and when I really needed them to, right? And they have and they do and they will. But I don't actually have like a lot of people on the Rolodex, if that makes sense, right? And so, and certainly not at the, how do I say, the level of depth. I think you and I have had one of the most sustained deep friendships. Like I think some friendships were very deep at certain points in my life and then peter into like a more, less whatever it is. But I feel like you and I have, even in our troughs, it's always been like deep, you know?
I think that's one of the things that always connected us is because as people, we sort of don't know how to do it any other way. When it's real, I don't know. Like, I mean, yeah, of course, we both know how to have acquaintances and we both know how to function out in society. But I think that's what drew me to you. I know that's what drew me to you as a friend. Um, and what has made it so that I always want to be your friend is that, like, it's such a relief to know whenever we chat or just like, I don't even know how to say this without being cheesy, but it's just like, it's a relief. You are a relief. You have always been a relief. And if I think back, like, that is the felt experience of you, is relief. Like, to know that you are this person who doesn't require performance and doesn't give one. That's huge, because there's people, like, even someone else who shall be unnamed in this podcast, who I've known, I've known even longer than you. We still touch base, but there's a whole performance going on, and like half the conversation I got to bring popcorn because I know what's coming and I'll be entertained, but it's like, like, okay, you know.
I think that part of it, the performance, and you won't get one. I mean, I'm curious about that because so much of what I remember, especially when we were younger and I was still trying to like figure out who I was and how I wanted to show up for friends, I was so locked down for so much of our friendship.
You absolutely were. And one of your questions in the little, or not, it was not little, let's not minimize it, the very thoughtful document you sent me was about, what was it like to be friends with someone so emotionally closed off. Yes, you were, but I simultaneously knew that you knew it. And also, like, you knew that I was like really in a fucked up place with, because just to be like fully real, like, when I met you, it was right after, so my sophomore year was when I developed anorexia. And um, also, basically, it resulted in, like, my experience of it was being abandoned by my friends, my little group of Hebrew school friends, whatever. And that year that I met you, I was in a really bad place because I had regained all this weight from being so underweight, but my brain hadn't healed at all. My psyche hadn't healed at all. And I felt like I was so tortured and so sad. Um, and like I said, you were this relief. I could like be around you, and I felt like you were also kind of tortured in your own way.
Yeah. Well, when we met, to your point, so when we met, I was also a little bit dislocated and disoriented, right? Like I was a freshman and I was new to the public school system. I had been in a private
Right?
school since kindergarten and I was very, very comfortable there. And I was basically at this school against my will at first, right? My parents made the decision, like, you will be going to a new school. And I had spent the whole summer raging and crying and thinking I could change their minds with being upset. And walking onto the tennis court, I mean, for in some ways, the tennis team saved my life in terms of finding a place and a space in what otherwise might have felt like a very large, hard to navigate kind of place. And I remember because I think for the first, and you can help correct my memory, but I think for the first like season, I was still kind of like just trying to get to know people. And like, I think I was sort of observing you a little bit more from afar. I don't think it
Mm.
was until my sophomore year, when were we AP Bio partners? Was that your senior year?
I can't remember if it was junior or senior.
I think it must have been your senior year because we're 2 years apart, right?
Right,
So
right, right.
yeah, so I think I just knew you as this really intense, really good, really good tennis player. And I was kind of like, she's probably too like intense in a good way for me. Cause I'm just like trying to make friends. I'm trying to like, play my little games. And I don't even know the first moment where I realized like, no, this is actually my person and she's been here the whole time. Um, and that was hard because I was so used to having a group and a gang of people around, and I was this person having to start over again. So I guess on some level, we both found each other at like a very opportune but really vulnerable time.
Yeah, and it really helped me because like I didn't feel like I had anywhere that was safe to be vulnerable. And maybe that's what deep friendship in part is like the safety to be vulnerable, to have weaknesses, to have struggles, and to be met there in a way that feels like it's like settling into a hug. I know. I know. But like I use that metaphor a lot in my head because I carry with me a very visceral sense of what it's like to be able to settle into a hug and what it's like not to be. And it's like I put my parents on both ends of that. And so when I feel in my body that I can settle into a hug with someone, that means safety.
And I like because settling, sometimes we use that word and it feels so passive. And
Right.
yet I
No.
think settling into is like first you have to like form a collective space and you have to choose to enter that space and to stay in it in like a sustained pose almost, right? Like there's no kind of like, you know, passively ending up in a hug that you want to settle into. And one of the things I appreciate about our friendship, and I think, as you said, makes it maybe hard to have a lot of them, is you do see the person in all of the things that make them wonderful and also the things that make them a little less easy to get to be around, right? And you had a very good way and still do of like calling me on it, and I don't mean it in a like, hey girl, like you got to check your, yeah, it's more of a, I see you and we can talk about this part of you just as much as we can talk about all of the great parts. Is that, I don't know, is that something that you entered in knowing how to do, like, or that you learned, like that we learned together, or that you learned at like what was that like?
I mean, if I'm being really honest about holding the multiple parts of someone, that is that's been a result of having a child and confronting what my divorces really were both about. Like that's been, I think, as much as I have still so much work to do with myself, um, that is something that's really opened up for me, I would say, in the past decade. Because growing up, there was one way to be in my household and amongst like talk about female friendships. Like I was obsessed with fitting in before I met you when I was younger. Like I held certain people up on these pedestals of coolness, not because they were like smart like you or introspective. Like that was the thing. Is like you represented this great departure from. I mean, and you know who I'm talking about. This is what's funny. You know who I'm talking about. This different type of person, and to kind of come close to how I experience you, like has been a process of trying to get more brave and more brave in my life of like, I don't gotta please so and so with my fashion and whatever. Like, I please. And like the whole like, oh, I know so and so, like, the adult version of all that stuff. Who you know and where your kid goes, da da da, and all this. It's just like, oh my God, please. And that's why I think I have trouble in social situations. Like, I want to talk about real stuff. Like, I'll engage in small talk for a few minutes, and then it's just like, all right, so, you know, what's the story? And people are like, what? But anyway, I don't know where I started from that comment. Oh, you asked me about holding multiple parts and bearing that tension. I mean, that's certainly been a theme in my own growth and in my work as a therapist, is that notion in and of itself. And I think you were very much my first. I didn't know it consciously, but you and our friendship were the first introduction I had to that, because you wore multiple parts on your sleeve, whether you realized it or not. You were very clearly, you very clearly had conviction about certain things that were important to you, intellectually and artistically, while also conveying what felt to me like a confusion about who you were sexually and where you wanted to land with that. Like, I knew. We both knew. We didn't articulate it, but we knew together. And so those were two things that I felt were in tension. Like, some way that you came across as like someone of conviction and then someone of confusion. And then also what you taught me about what it is to be like the intersection of your identities socioculturally and racially, like being African American, but also being wealthy. And like, you would talk about the Oreo situation, you would talk about Jack and Jill. And that was an introduction to me of holding multiple parts. And then I also saw your family as very, like, you had this family structure spread across two households, with you going between them, watching you go between the house. Like, there was just a lot that I observed, that you let me observe.
Well, you earned it. It wasn't just like, selling tickets. Because I think on some level, you were able to say things out loud in a very direct and curious way, in ways that other kids, I mean, we were kids, right? We were in high school. We were like 14, 15, 16. I don't think a lot of people asked me a lot about like, I think it was kind of just like, oh, that's Ara's family. Like, okay. But yet there was this, you were talking about fitting in. I feel like there was always this kind of like, well, we're interchangeable parts, whether or not we're like this one or that one. And Ara is just one of the many. And I never felt like one of the many. I know that's going to sound weird. It's like this poor little popular girl syndrome of like, I never quite understood why people liked me. And I was always suspicious in some way because they never articulated it in the ways that you were able to say, like, "Dit, dit, 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 dit," and here's the stuff that I think you're working on, and like that conviction, confusion. And you were able to actually, I guess, be curious in a way that didn't have me screaming into the void of my journal. I actually got to talk to a human about it.
Right. I was very curious about you. And I was also just very like, I needed you. I really needed you. And you were there.
And that's it's scary to be needed sometimes because you get used to it. You get used to it. I got used to it.
I know. That's how
And
I
then
broke your heart. I know.
yeah. But
I
that
I regret that a lot that I didn't very unskillful and unthoughtful in my navigation. Like I was so I had to get out of there so badly, that house, that you were collateral damage. And I regret that a lot.
but on some level, you know, you think about, you know, people use the word like, oh, they were so careless or so reckless with me. But I see this is that duality of our friendship where we knew but we didn't know. And I think on some level, even though my heart was, I mean, broken, I didn't think you were actively trying to hurt me. I didn't think that you were actively like going out of your way to say, you know what, I'm getting out of this town. I'm getting out of this place. I'm going to go find safety in other people, right? Like, I think I knew on some level that that's just how the world had to work, right? And I think that's why the fact that we've been able to come back to each other, we've gone apart, we've come back, you know, like there's this whole backdrop of all of the other wonderful things that have happened to us personally, all the not so wonderful things. And we haven't even actually witnessed a lot of them in the same
Oh,
place or space, right? Like I wasn't at your weddings, you weren't at mine, right? Like I think you met like we met our people like long after we were in relationships with them, and yet I mean, I wasn't there for Abby's birthday. Like all of these things that I think people would assume we would have experienced together. Like,
I know. That's why our friendship is really unique and special. Like, it's like when we met and we developed together, we, put a string between us, and we've just held on to it. And that's what connects us. It's like we haven't done the typical close friend things of all the events and milestones. We just like hold on to the string.
do you think imagination plays a role in that? Because one of my favorite memories
Imaginariums.
yes, is us. We used to walk around the park and we would have it was almost like vision quests, right? Like we would
Yeah.
have these visioning exercise, like, what's it going to be like? What are we going to do? And I just wonder, I don't know if you encounter this like in your practice or just being someone who thinks about things deeply, like, how does the role of having an ability to imagine with each other and other people seeing possibilities, like, does that help the string stay or do you see this as like totally incidental?
Yeah, I don't I mean, I guess I'm reacting in a very like with my hands. Like
Mhm.
I see imagination as this,
Mhm.
and
Up.
I see friendship as this. And I think the Imaginariums were they were very much born of, just in my opinion, that period of our lives and where we were in development. Like if you think of us on a trajectory, just age wise, like I think that we were doing something there with each other that was really healthy for two adolescent girls to be doing together, letting ourselves be expansive in our minds. Um, Not to say I don't still do that, um, but it's like I'm having trouble making the connection between that and the attachment. I also think, just personally speaking, I was in a place where I had a lot invested in escape and fantasy. I did not want to be where I was. And it's very painful for me to remember that because like I've had that at other times in my life and it's like a really shitty feeling. And I think I needed to imagine to get some respite.
I'm thinking about all the times I imagine things on a daily basis. Um, it's interesting because I do think there's a level of protective covering that my imagination has given me
Okay.
just walking with the various intersections, right? So less about the interpersonal um, things that have happened or happened, but just walking through the world. I think having my imagination to remind me that I can't allow myself to be limited by reality in some ways helps me just get through the day.
Mm.
Because it's like if I can imagine an alternative, right, where I'm interesting, where I'm intelligent, where I'm, the sort of center of the narrative, where I'm the one in control of the narrative, it's a lot easier to sort of, I guess, beam back into real life where that may not always be the case, particularly as an African American woman of a certain educational attainment in the certain spaces in which I walk professionally. It's not
Mhm.
always a given, right? Like, I'll use a different example. I think I've talked about this, but I was at a conference and they said, close your eyes and imagine a lawyer. And I was a lawyer. My little sister is a lawyer. Like, we have tons of lawyers that we know. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, they had a slide up, and it was like an older gentleman. He was white. And that's who I imagined. And so I mean, like all of implicit bias is
Wow.
is is a really, and so the amount of work I have to do, I think, on a subconscious basis, I think part of the conscious work is you have to remember to tell yourself other stories.
Hmm. That is really interesting. That is not a lens I have thought of. Imagination. Because I like, if I'm thinking about it, like, what is the lens that I turn back to? It's like I get maybe ultra realistic. Like, what is the truth here that I have to sit with that I'm trying to run from?
Mm.
That's a question I often ask myself when I'm feeling like I'm spiraling. And again, I'm aware of like pulling in a direction and feeling like directional, and this is not value judgment, it's just
Yeah.
observation, like that imagination would be here and it's like falling down into this like truth. Like, my mother is my mother has a personality disorder and hasn't given me the mothering that I need, and she is my mother. And I'm going to call her and see how she's doing. Like all of this, and like when I find myself like spiraling into like, oh my God, she's so annoying. I hate her. I wish she, blah, 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 blah. And I come back and I say, okay, what's the truth that I'm having trouble holding here? The truth is like my wishes will continue to be unrealized unless she has a frontal lobotomy and she is still here on this earth and is my mother. Okay, that's what I'm having trouble sitting with. Can I sit with that? Can I just hold that?
Yeah. I mean, so like with anxiety, the thing when I'm anxious, a lot of the time it is about feeling unsettled in my own, like feeling like I'm almost like jumping out of my skin.
Mhm.
And that, I mean, the grounding exercise, like, what can I see in this room? Like, what can I,
Yeah.
and I think for me, on some level, it's like, because I think of my fiction, right, as my imagination practice, right? Like,
Right.
And I think there it's almost like the opposite of being grounded fully. It's almost like the grounding is the launch pad to say like, okay, but wait, and this, and what if this got even more absurd? And what if I like
Yeah.
actually say the thing I never say out loud? And Hillary's been really, my wife, helpful in sort of like that, going up and out. It's almost
Uh-huh.
like a hot air balloon, like up and away. Because I think so much of my daily life is lived in this very like grounded, centered, measured, don't make a false move, like, and so that's the place where I get to let it rip and be like, oh my God, what if I like couldn't stand this person? Or like, what if, like
Hmm.
it's interesting. It almost feels like we're,
You're pointing out something though. I'm not sure if you use the word energy,
nope.
but we're talking about also energy. And I think energetically we need both. And so it's like, as we're talking, it's like, well, where do I get that expansive energy? Where do I go up? Because I do. And now it's like, well, duh. Like, what was I doing the other night after I came back from this school event? I sat in my car and just listened to the rest of the Dead show I had on. That's like out. That is out.
You've been
And
doing that for a while.
yeah, I mean, that's something that's endured for decades. Music in general, but I think that band specifically. Um, and it's really important. It's really healthy to have both of those kinds of energies, a grounding energy and an expansive energy. Yeah.
You never went to Lilith Fair with me.
No comment. We went to Seal. Okay.
We did go to
That's
see.
enough. I already have to carry that besmirch
You may not
on my
get
musical
you
heritage.
may not get into the next Dead concert. Um, the thing that we shared didn't share was tennis. And that was one of the things that got me really like thinking about this conversation was I was reading The Inner Game of Tennis this summer and this idea of I can't summarize the book, but it got me thinking about there's like the conscious thinking self and then there's the body that does, right? And it's like you need both, but you need to know when to let them work their magic. And I I remember your high school senior year record.
The tennis conversation is like another conversation
Yeah.
because I had no idea you were watching me. I was totally intimidated by your playing. I thought you were so polished and so well trained, and I was this fucking rug rat who just chased everything down without any technique. And the fact that you were even like looking at me as a good player shocks me to no end. So I think I have to like think about that more because, but then the inner game of tennis and what was tennis, I think is a great conversation. Both what was tennis for our friendship and what was tennis for us individually in the context of what we were navigating at that time.
Pin. That's all I have to say. Anyway, thank you for giving me some of your Sunday. Well, that's all for this episode of I'm Here Too. Thank you all so much for joining us. I hope that you enjoyed our conversation. Please remember to subscribe so that you don't miss the next conversation. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.